All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back onto the podcast for his second appearance, John O'Brien. He is the president of Radiant Advisors and an instructor for us at many TDWI events, including TDWI Las Vegas, Transform Las Vegas in February 23rd through the 28th. He will be our keynote speaker. I'm very happy to have him on again to talk today about data architecture and the evolution of that specific area within data and analytics with AI becoming more and more prevalent. But let me pause here. John, thank you so much for joining. How you doing? Where do we find you today?
Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm back at home in Boulder, Colorado. So we're enjoying quite a one of those Arctic blasts. But I'll be looking forward to the Vegas and some of the nicer, warmer weather at Transform in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, a lot of folks are feeling the cold in the air. I think in Vegas will be a nice harbor for many folks in your area and in your same position.
Uh-huh.
But okay, as I want to jump in here because there's a lot for us to cover on this topic. I think it's an important topic, hence the reason that you're going to be the keynote speaker at the event that we're discussing here. So let me start with this one here, John. At TDWI, we see that building or evolving the data foundation for AI is a top priority for, of course, data management. Can you explain to us why this is so important right now?
Okay. Yeah, I think it is. It's important in two aspects. One is the hype or the craze around AI these days, especially around generative AI, and everybody's looking towards this for, their company. Every company is looking at it. It will have profound, impacts, efficiencies, benefits, and things like that. So, in the last year or two, we've really seen companies say, what are we doing about this, right? And one of the things that, if you've been around in the industry as long as I have, and a number of my peers and colleagues at TDWI have, over the decades, we've seen these transformational waves come, right? We saw it with big data. We've seen it with, it was Hadoop a long time ago, and the whole world was going to change, and we're still here. So one of the things that we're looking at is how is this going to evolve what we've been doing, what, is proven, what works, what adds value, and really treat this as an evolution of our data architecture to extend it into including new capabilities. One of the big things that I work on with clients all the time at Radiant is really taking a very much a capabilities-based approach. So what are your data and analytic capabilities? Generative AI and everything that goes with that, a new set of technologies and things like that, but data driving automation, driving generation, right? So once again, it comes back into how good is our data? How are we going to leverage our data in order to drive a new capability? Just like business intelligence was, just like data science is, just like self-services. All of these are very valuable. They all have governance and other capabilities around them, but generative is just another section, and it's going to be a strong pillar for us as it drives automation. Now, what this means, for the data architect world, a lot of people are buzzing about the whole, renaissance in data management. I would say since 2017, we've been in this renaissance because that's when machine learning popped on the market and, promised to change things. And it was just a stepping stone to where we're at today with generative. So, when you look at this, it really is, right? We've been talking about big data since, 10, 15 years ago. And big data was all about the unstructured data, all of this massive amount of documents and content and images and things like that, which very few companies really did anything with, right? Enterprise BI and stuff was really about structured data and operational systems and putting that data into a big data platform. But we weren't doing big analytics with it. And so that's one of the key points is that we're finally moving from little data and little analytics in big data to now big analytics truly. So as you look at this, you're going to say, well, I can ask, Chat GPT of any one of the 90 different engines out there or the big LLMs, and yeah, you'll get a generic answer. That's what it was trained on. So what you need to do is give it context, give it semantics about your company, your metrics, how you define things, how you want to find things, just like you were onboarding and training a new employee. So now we have to look at our data, our unstructured side of the data, and how we're going to kind of give that the semantic reference that Chat GPTs and LLMs need to do and fulfill their promise. So it's an extension. We're definitely going to be adding some new things and some new sub architectures, but the overall enterprise architecture, a lot of people are on their journey and kind of growing and moving through that. And based on the company's priorities, this is a new capability in the spectrum we need to give them. So based on your priorities, this could be first, or you know, it could be later. Either way, you need to start getting your data in order now.
Yeah, that
So
that makes a lot of sense. And I think, to your point, the evolution piece, I think, is something that might be an easier term for folks as opposed to, like you're saying, you don't need to start from scratch, right? You don't have to start from zero and then move to one in this area, right? Um,
yeah,
so in that evolution, though, I'm sure there's a lot of challenges. I think you just touched on, one at the very end of what you were just talking about there. But can you maybe talk about some of the biggest challenges for enterprises in
yeah.
this particular scenario where they're going to try to evolve and move into some of this bigger data stuff that you're talking about?
There's a few that are going on. So for some companies that are already on that journey with, their data lake houses and things like that, or they're on cloud data warehousing, so they've got the scalability in place, and it becomes a good platform for them to expand. A lot of companies are still on their legacy architectures, and it works, right? It adds value. So, your on-prem data warehouse or on-prem data marts and lines of business. So when you start to think of the big picture, right, and it's a bigger data strategy, one of the big areas that companies are challenged with is and we work on the most is, okay, what is my data strategy going to be? Let's look at the business priorities and goals and things like that. But where is your data architecture today? How much of it do you have one foot in the cloud and one foot on prem? And, so look at the tool. The ecosystems is a big challenge as well, because they'll pick, hey, we're going to move on this approach and these vendors, but now they've got to talk about a new data ecosystem. And I think that's becoming the bigger trend right now, which is how do we architect an enterprise data ecosystem? Because there are architectures, right? We have that, but what is that ecosystem of tools that work well together, that are compatible, that can be on-prem and up in the cloud and get all the benefits that we need? The second really big one, I would say that CIOs and CDOs are always asking me is, how can we play with this new technology, new shiny object, safely? Right? I can't be giving it company data and sending that off into the cloud and training LLMs and reinforcement in a way that, it helps my competitors or I lose track of sensitive. And so they really are in this stage of, yes, let's take a look at data management. Let's dial that down. But now let's take a look at, hey, we want to get our upskilling going, right? Our AI engineers, our machine learning engineers, our how are we going to play with an LLM? So how do we create a safe environment in which we can start to experiment, explore, test, things like that? That's where I see most companies. The next question that comes up very quickly, just like with every system and platform, ChatGPT is going to give you, or your own internal GPT or chatbot, it's going to give you an answer. How do you know it's right? How are we going to test and QA this thing? How are we going to maintain it, right? These things are very probabilistic versus very deterministic, like BI is. So, you'll get an answer, but now we have to start to track, is this answer correct? Is it complete? Is this the right answer it should have given? Just like you were onboarding and training a new employee. So the testing systems is kind of the follow-on, but they're tackling that from a, how do I set up a safe, secure environment? So, and I've seen many of the vendors put this at the top of their list, trust and security as the first thing they have to answer before you can get a company to play with their tools. So it's really those two things. One is what is our data strategy and AI strategy more specifically? And then within the AI strategy, how do we, the first step of exploration, how do we do that safely?
Hmm. I'm sorry to press on this a little bit further. Have you seen some companies that maybe you can share an example of that like sort of success that they've achieved with those two aspects?
Yeah, so I would say that the clients I've worked with, we have set up safe environments. They are learning, and once you get into the deeper levels of generative AI and things like that, you have, LLMs. So I've been spending a lot of our time with what we call RAGs, retrieval augmented generation. So there's a lot of the variations, and part of the data architecture is like, yes, we knew we were going to do RAG. We need to give it more, semantics. So I think one, it's the introduction or adoption of vector databases. So we can do the vector embeddings of all of our documentation, setting up that new process. They're getting traction there and they're watching their kind of retrieval response windows improve in accuracy. There's the other one where we talk about knowledge graphs, and that's another approach, or you can do a hybrid approach. I do see companies struggling with that because they want quicker results. And I think the knowledge graph of enterprises are a bigger, important long-term strategy, but a lot of companies, frankly, are very short focused because the hard part is there's the FOMO, the fear of missing out. They all have to jump in. They have to get in. And I'm like, play the long game here. Yes, we have to do it, but, let's be responsible and thoughtful about moving forward. So, and we build that out in the architecture roadmap. We include the vector database. We get the upskilling, look on the response windows. How are we, going to manage our data, our documentation in a way to feed that? So semantic layers have really risen up to being one of the top areas of we're making progress in the first phases. What does your semantic layer look like? How are you going to get context into generative AI? That's the problem we have to solve before we can get to kind of the benefits of Gen AI.
Oh, that was excellent. Thank you for taking me through that. And I had teed up my next question was going to be, can you give me some best practices for like organizations that are just starting out in this example? I know you might have probably just touched on a couple of best practices in your last couple answers there, but are there any others that you might want to call out for organizations that are making this move?
Yeah. So what's interesting is best practice wise. So one of the things that I am at TDWI sessions, I've been teaching there forever, and with those sessions, and I love that. But one of the things I keep telling people about best practices is to come back to really data management principles. Because every time we've seen technology change underneath us, best practices by definition are looking in the past at an approach that has been proven to be successful many times over. So you want to adopt it. Clearly, you're not on the leading edge. And also, we're on new technology adoption here. So that means if you have the right data management principles and take a look at things, don't be afraid to break some of the best practices, create what makes sense, that on principles that you can explain to people and say, hey, I don't know if this is a best practice, but I know it works. I know it adds value to the company. Because I keep telling them next year at the next TDWI event, we might be up here talking about you and what you did because now it's a best practice. Right. So it's with best practices, it's a little bit, you have to be careful. You, as a company, if you're a little bit on, mainstream or conservative, yes, you want to adopt what's proven. You don't want to thrash. But there's a lot of learning and experience that comes out of, thrashing a little bit, but we're trying to manage that. We don't want to be on, here's our saying, we want to be on the cutting edge, not the bleeding edge. So that's that sweet spot that we're looking for. I think the other thing at a high level, and I don't know if this is really best practices, this is more trends, that within 2022 and 23, with some of the first release ChatGPT stuff and generative AI, everybody was, the generative capabilities, whether it was just text, right, and conversational, or, now we're seeing image and video generation. But we are moving towards, you'll see the buzzword this year in 2025, agentic.
Mm.
And agentic is really the natural progression. Ask a question, get a response. Now, I've even worked at companies where we're saying, hey, that makes sense. Now go do it. And it's like, sorry, I can't go do that because it's not an agent on your behalf yet. So there aren't the APIs in place where when I say, go do this, it will log into the CRM and update the profiles and do things as part of that. So you're seeing this move to agentic in 2025, which is great. And then you're going to see this multi-agent, right? So this year, the focus is not just on the generation, it's on the reasoning. Is this a good answer? AI is starting to check itself.
Mm.
Great. We've gotten better at it. And now we're going to say with that reasoning, we want it to take action. But now I think it's going to be more in 2026, that you'll see the orchestrators that say, hey, I'm going to reason this. I'm going to take this action and I'm going to let this other agent take this action. What this means is, as an orchestrator, you're going to have LLMs specialize with their semantics. So have one that's specialized in finance, one that's specialized in sales, right? So when you do order to cash as a business lifecycle, it's going to talk to individual specialized LLMs. And so a lot of this year is going to be focusing that. And that's, I love this definition I saw the other day of strategy, doing something today that gives you the advantage tomorrow. So if we're looking to 2026 and this capability of orchestration and coordination, what do we have to build this year? Right. And that's what I think is going on inside of the generative AI world, leading into the agentic world right now. So we've got a lot of work to do in the data management space to support that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we've been hearing a lot about the
Mhm.
agentic AI in the last few weeks,
That's the
with
buzz. I'm telling you.
big announcements from different companies about
Oh,
what
yeah.
they're able to do. And it's fascinating to me. I'm very interested to see what happens. And then the orchestration piece that you just talked about. I fear that I would tangentially go into that podcast separate from this with you right now for another hour or so. But unfortunately, our time is limited today, and perhaps you'll come back and we can talk more about that as it develops.
And
But
really keep in mind that that's what we're building towards, right? So
exactly,
we've got to lay a lot of groundwork this year. A lot of companies need to, get their data architecture and platforms,
right.
right, the snuff to enable this so that they're not, missing out next year.
Yeah, very good. No, and that's so true. And I think that, truthfully, a lot of the best practices, regardless of topic, come down to like make sure you're getting the basics right before you jump leapfrog ahead to try and do too many things. So, not surprised to hear you say that. But I also like the idea that, you want to have some people at least trying new things and have a safe environment to do it, which is but kind of recapping our entire conversation. And for folks, again, the keynote is Foundation for the Future, Data Architecture in the Era of AI. It'll be on February 24th at TDWI Las Vegas. John, do you have any other pieces for us regarding that? I believe there's a panel discussion going on with that keynote. Is that correct?
I believe there's going to be a panel discussion. I haven't seen the questions, so it's always fun to see what the folks are going to come up with. But I think that the other aspect that I'm also presenting there that's later in the week on Wednesday is I have a class that's really around active metadata and
Hmm.
how active metadata works within trust, observability, and data fabric world. So, one of the things I definitely am always pushing about like we're saying, what do we do today, right? What do you do when you go home from the conference? Get on your metadata. Metadata is all of, by definition, it's the semantics, it's the context of something. And that's what we have to give AI because it doesn't have any context. It has, general, because the LLMs are just getting better and better and better. But it doesn't have the context about your company and your processes and products and services and your branding and things like that. So you have to get really good at that. And the best thing to do is, if you want to train machine learning or train AI on something, you've got to give it data. And the data that we have is not just data, it's all the metadata we could be generating. So there's a big focus, I believe, today, has been last year as well, on active metadata for this.
And that, of course, makes a lot of sense. Going back to what you were talking about being able to do, these things, you have to set everything in place, give them, a definition and give them context. And obviously, metadata is a huge component of
Oh,
that. And I'm glad you mentioned that class that
yeah,
you're going to be teaching here at TWI. You're also going to be doing a seminar for us in April on the topic of metadata
it's
for
important.
folks who may. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up. Do you have something else to add there?
I was just going to add one of the key takeaways from that, like one of the little nuggets when you're looking at all this, because you're right, we're in data management. We've been doing metadata for decades. So that's not new to us. The thing is, don't worry about the structure. Don't worry about
Mhm.
defining your metadata. Don't worry, just capture it, right? Just capture it, dump it someplace. AI will figure it out. That's the beauty of it, right? It doesn't have to be nicely structured and organized in different
Mhm.
tables or file formats or whatever. Just dump it and start capturing it. So I really focus, one of the nuggets I said is, work on developing the habit, right? We want a daily habit. I want data product teams and data engineering teams to focus on how do I capture all the metadata about what I just built so that it's just putting all this extra data that we can use to train machine learning algorithms or train the data fabric in ways that are going to help us. So that's one of the little nuggets there.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think we'll put a bow on it with that last comment there, John. I do appreciate your time today. It was fantastic talking with you again. And a reminder for folks, if you would like to catch John, you can catch him at TDWI in Las Vegas, February 23rd through the 28th. He's appearing more than once there, as he's mentioned. He's also involved in a lot of the stuff that we do here at TDWI, so you can catch him in different places. But more specifically, in April, he will also be leading that seminar on metadata for the data fabric. If you're interested, I'll put links for everyone in the description of this episode. But thanks again, John, for your time. I really
Thank you,
appreciate you
Edwin.
coming on.
Nice to catch up with you again.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
Thanks.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast, or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.